Today we are with Clayton Dean of Circa Interactive, an enrollment marketing agency. Welcome, Clayton.
Thanks for having me.
Today we're going to be talking about higher ed marketing. So Clayton, what are the top trends for higher ed marketing in 2019?
This is something we talk with our partners quite often about, and this time of year, something that's always in the conversation. Two specific areas we really have our eye on moving into the next year. One is mission and story-driven marketing as kind of the foundation of a marketing strategy. And just kind of to set a baseline here, what we've seen in the last decade of higher ed is a lot of institutions are really focused on marketing more feature sets of programs rather than focusing on telling a story and really painting a picture for individuals. So, they're focusing on marketing a degree program, how long the degree program is, what the cost is, things like that.
More specifics.
Exactly,
Yeah.
But really, looking ahead to next year, and one of the most effective ways we're seeing to be a bit more effective in our strategies is focusing more on telling a really clear story. Connecting with faculty and stakeholders within the institution to understand, what matters to them, what their mission is, and craft our marketing message and our content around a lot of those narratives to make it a lot more impactful. Number two is deploying more technology. So, and I say that in the sense of, we need to find better ways to engage with folks. And technology is a great way to do that. And students, the demographic of students is shifting, and different communication expectations. So leveraging artificial intelligence and natural language processing and chatbots, for example. There's a lot of technology we can deploy to be more effective and efficient in how we operate in higher ed and to do a better job of engaging with students.
Cool. Let's go back to storytelling. How are colleges and universities currently telling those stories?
Yeah.
And how do you guys help them tell those stories?
So, really at the end of the day, a lot of institutions aren't doing a good job of telling their stories. So, I'd say that's one of the things we really focus on with any new partner that we work with is coming in and sitting down with all the stakeholders, with faculty, and really zeroing in and identifying that story, helping them figure out what that story is. They may have, a general mission or something they kind of believe in, but to really craft a story and a powerful marketing message, you really have to put the time in to talk to folks, understand the different personalities, understand their goals, objectives, individual courses, what are they trying to accomplish, and at the end of the day, how does that tie into the overall mission of the program, of the department, of the institution, and kind of putting all that together in a really tight, powerful package.
What does that package typically look like? Is it like blog post, video, like what does that look like?
It's very holistic. So if you look at the entire marketing mix, you're talking video, blog content, digital PR, where we're working with faculty to get them in the media, and you can kind of help tell that story through the major media. Paid advertising, paid media, Facebook advertising, Google advertising, your ad copy, your landing pages, your microsite. That story should really touch and resonate throughout the entire marketing mix.
So not just one channel.
Exactly.
Hit them on multiple channels.
Yep, exactly. And so what, as when we come in and work with a new partner, we'll really focus on, as I mentioned, sitting down and working with faculty and stakeholders. And then our goal from like an output perspective is to create a very, condensed guide that will help guide everyone in the department, whether it's marketing, enrollment, folks talking to prospective students, making sure everybody's clear and consistent on what that message is, what the story is, and kind of lay a baseline of recommendations for anybody who is doing any marketing, talking to any students, and make sure that's all consistent across the board.
Cool. What kind of stories are really resonating with this target audience or target audiences?
Yeah, so that's a good question. We come across a lot, and I think more than most institutions realize lie within their programs or departments. For example, American University, we ran a campaign recently where the mission of the education department, and specifically we're working with a couple master's programs under that, is centered around, ensuring individuals of all walks of life have access to education and quality education at that. So we ran a campaign, with kind of the goal of engaging with our target audience of prospective students for a specific master's program who align and believe in that same mission, who are, really want to go in and change their community and impact the local education system and make sure, especially underserved communities are getting the quality education that they need. And the whole campaign was centered around raise your hand if you believe in equal education, if you believe in equality in education. And that really resonated with the audience, and we were able to align the program with a target audience who connected with that mission and believed in that mission. So we're able to do our job better and make sure we're delivering the best quality students for a program. And the program's able to deliver on their mission of sending out these folks into their community to change the education system, whether it's in their local community and at the state level, at the federal level. And it kind of allowed both of us to accomplish our goals.
Awesome. What can a university, what can a school or a program do to really set themselves apart from a marketing, advertising perspective?
Yeah, so that's the biggest challenge right now with most institutions, especially those going online. The online space, even no matter how great of a brand you have, you're competing nationally, internationally. So that's a challenge a lot are facing. What we find one of the best ways to do that is to focus on persona, individual personas and very specific audiences. So a lot of institutions will kind of do broad stroke marketing, and a lot of times that's because of a lack of resources or just by virtue of what they have available. They kind of have to do as much as they can with very little. But the more you can focus on targeting very specific audiences and crafting a unique story and message that's going to resonate with those folks, and you're going to put yourself in places that they operate, and every audience can be a little bit different, especially if you're looking at Generation Z and the 18-year-olds coming into the undergrad space where they kind of live and operate online and what they care about versus the graduate level, which might be 34, 35 years old. So you kind of have to think about how you're targeting both of those, and the story you're telling, the technology you're using to connect with them. So that's definitely a major focus. I think mission and story-driven marketing is another. I know it's kind of a common theme right now, but that's really the biggest opportunity I think we see is we're seeing our cost per leads for a lot of our clients where we're introducing a really powerful story to our marketing message. Again, holistic marketing, the complete marketing mix. We're seeing our cost per leads cut in half, and we're seeing an impact on the bottom line for schools. We're making them more efficient. But what that's really telling us is it's allowing them to stand out in a market where traditionally they might be paying a higher cost per click on their advertisements, but they're getting a lot of traction and resonating with an audience, generating a lot of natural organic shares on their paid strategies. We're able to be more efficient on the marketing side, and somebody's scrolling through their Facebook feed. The more you can connect with them on a deeper level and engage with them on a level that your competitors are not,
right.
You're going to be in good shape.
Awesome. So we kind of hit on a few of these channels that universities can be effective at really engaging and connecting, right? What are some of the channels that you recommend? And I know that it could kind of vary, right, depending on who the audience is,
Absolutely.
undergrad, grad.
Yep.
What kind of channels have you guys seen and noticed be more effective than others, perhaps?
Yeah, right now, Instagram and Facebook are still the big ones, and just by virtue of the audience segmentation, and just by the sheer numbers of folks on those platforms. We're seeing some growth in kind of alternative apps like WhatsApp is definitely a huge growth area, especially as a lot of institutions are looking to go international. They're seeing a lot of traction there. But right now, undergrad, I'd say YouTube is a big one, and that's where video really comes into play. The numbers are pretty staggering when you look at the Generation Z audience that, the current audience that the undergrad folks in marketing are targeting. Video is really it. That's where they're consuming their information. They're not reading. They'd rather engage with quality video content. So YouTube's, I think, is a big one on the undergrad side. On the graduate level, Your traditional channels are still kind of king right now. But I think as we look for new alternative ways to target those folks, as competition increases, the cost to market on those channels increase, we're testing new alternative methods, in media to try to engage with those folks. So, for example, podcasts are pretty popular. So we're doing, we're trying to testing different specific, again, going back to targeting very specific audiences. We're doing some testing in those areas, and we're seeing great results there.
Awesome. What kind of video strategies are you kind of seeing play a part in higher ed marketing?
Yeah, so a lot of the short and impactful type video content, the stuff you kind of see on Instagram or Snapchat is really quality, and we're seeing that work very well. I think we did some studies with University of Central Florida, and what we gathered from some of the information that we collected was students like hearing from other students. So the content and the video where you're talking and interviewing and learning what the experience is like and what real feedback from real students is, rather than a faculty member talking about a program and what it entails and why it's so great. What we learned was, those prospective students want to hear from other folks that are like them.
Right.
And that's really, I think, the biggest focus in video right now should be focusing on, organic, authentic type video content, especially for that younger demographic. They expect that. They want it. They expect authenticity. They expect quality. And I think that's the best way to do it, and kind of impromptu, not super planned type video content is definitely you're gonna see more of that coming up as schools are getting more savvy, but there's still a ton of opportunity, and a lot of people aren't taking advantage of that.
Cool. If you could speak to head of marketing, director of marketing right now, and give them one single piece of advice that would really move the needle for them, what would that be?
And I hate to go back to storytelling,
Sure.
but I think involving faculty and stakeholders, and not to contradict my last point, but what I mean by that is, they know the programs, they know your programs as best as anybody. They're at the top of their game in their fields and industry, and a lot of institutions, and a lot of this really is on the graduate level too, but involving them in your marketing is a really powerful tool that a lot of folks in marketing and higher ed aren't taking advantage of, at least from helping craft the story, not necessarily making them the focal point of the story, but getting them involved and tying in, what's being covered in the curriculum, what their mission is, what their individual focus and what their individual research is on, and what they care about personally. We're seeing really, really strong results in that area, and I think the more folks can pull those folks in and make them part of the picture, the more impactful their marketing is going to be, the happier their faculty is going to be, especially if you're trying to launch an online program that some faculty may not be on board with. I think that's a great way to get them involved, make them feel part of the process. And also leveraging their expertise for marketing purposes, like digital PR is a great way to do that, and kind of taking their research and repackaging that for the mass media, and getting it out into major publications where you're getting a lot of impact and visibility from. So that'd be my biggest recommendation, and I think a lot are hesitant of working with faculty. They think it's too hard, they don't have time. But there's a lot of good solutions out there, and if you do it right, it definitely can work. And faculty are happy. You get better results in your marketing. Your marketing's more impactful. It's a pretty good situation.
So, what are some new ways that institutions are engaging with their students?
Yes. So this is I actually had a conversation recently with one of the major OPMs, a friend of mine there, and they're the best in the business in enrollment. And some concerning statistics, they were mentioning that they're seeing their engagement rate with prospective students drop almost to half of what it used to be. And I think a big problem with that, as we have a younger demographic coming into the pipeline, they're not picking up the phone, they're not working, they're not communicating through email like they used to, definitely not picking up the phone. So a lot of institutions are kind of still stuck in the old ways of enrollment, and really don't have any solutions on how can they even get folks into the pipeline to talk to them. So what we're focusing on is, and we're seeing a shift in thinking, is introducing new ways of communication. Text is a pretty obvious one. A lot of institutions still aren't making use of that. Chatbots and artificial intelligence are another really big area and big opportunity, especially for the smaller institutions who may not have the resources or infrastructure to handle a growth in enrollment, or you don't have the resources to hire additional folks to work on that end, talking with students. So we're actually working on a product, artificial intelligence chatbot, uses natural language processing to allow us to have a pretty fluid conversation 24 hours a day. That's a big expectation with the upcoming pipeline of students. They have a question, they want to know immediately, and they want to know it at midnight. So these chatbot solutions are allowing us to have those kind of in-depth conversations, answer the questions they have, and successfully kind of guide them to the next step, whether that's schedule a phone call if they do want to talk at that point, request more information, download a brochure, or apply. And we're able to tie in some of the story elements as well, and still make use of a broader, more mission-driven story that's a bit more impactful and kind of gets prospective students motivated. And the great thing about AI and artificial intelligence and chatbot type solutions is you can leverage these throughout the entire enrollment process. So it's not only a great tool to get them in the funnel, but it's a great tool to follow up with folks, because there's over an 80% open rate on Facebook messages, for example. So it's a great way to get in front of those folks if you compare that to phone or email, which can be, you can almost drill that down to about 10% or less. So it's a big difference from an engagement perspective. But you can use that tool to engage with them throughout the process, and also follow up with them once they're in the program on the retention side, and just make sure there's some support there. And this can all be done automated, and without having to add an additional full-time hire on the other side.
Cool. Is this just for grad, or is it also for undergrad? Or just for undergrad, or is it also for grad students?
Both sides. We're deploying it on the grad side, but undergrad is going to be even more important, because they're the early adopters. And so you need to be thinking about not only Facebook Messenger and text message from like an automated chatbot type solution, but also WhatsApp and any of these other technologies and platforms that are opening up their API and opening up a chat solution.
I'm not sure if you guys kind of get into AR at all. Do you guys?
No, it's definitely on our radar.
Okay.
Yeah, it's on our radar, and we're not seeing a lot of it. I know University of Oregon is doing some really unique stuff with their football team on the AR and VR side. We've talked a couple times with a couple institutions, just kind of spitballing ideas specific to the chatbot technology that we're rolling out, and how VR and AR can kind of be incorporated there. A lot of it was focused specifically on fundraising departments and development departments, and a lot of use on campus when they're giving tours and want to show a new building and kind of give folks a really realistic view of what they can expect there. We talked about sending an alumni campaign, and they're looking to build a new stadium, and they send out a virtual reality feature to all their alumni where they can put on some goggles and be in the new stadium and get to feel that. I know Stanford, their lead program, they're doing a lot of really unique augmented reality stuff within that program.
Cool.
Built within the learning environment. So you actually have a kind of a character, and you're sitting in the lecture hall, and you can look around at your neighbors and interact with your neighbors. And your neighbor here might be in China, and your neighbor here might be in Sao Paulo, Brazil.
That's awesome.
So I know they're doing a lot of unique stuff. And so I think a lot of the schools that may already have an internal department who they might be doing some research in AR and VR are going to be the early adopters, just because they have the resources. But I think a lot of institutions are a bit hesitant and maybe a bit unsure of really what it entails to even do something like that. As a lot are just trying to make sure they're launching effective marketing strategies and just basic page strategies, let alone you get into that world. It's a bit much, but we're going to see more of it in the coming years for sure.
Nice. What are some main objections that you're seeing in higher ed right now?
I think the faculty, when we approach folks and want to work with faculty, we get a lot of objections around that. We get a lot of objections around, internal departments when we come in and partner with an institution. There might be some hesitancy of like central communications departments or marketing teams, and it's just a process for us of just explaining our role coming in. We're not taking anyone's job. That's not what we're there to do. We really position ourselves as a literally an arm of their team and really work to help their team do an even better job. So we see a bit of that and just kind of working with some of the internal departments. I think you see a bit of hesitancy around investing in quality content. So I think maybe that's on us as marketers to do a better job with the data and kind of backing that up. But some aren't quite sure the dollars they invest, what's coming out the back end of that. So they want to make sure every dollar they spend, they're getting something in return. But quality content really is a driver of success right now. And the schools that are differentiating themselves well, connecting with prospective students on a much deeper level are delivering really high quality content. And on the flip side of that, the target audience expects really high quality content. The 18 to 34 demographic, they want high quality content. They don't want just engagement just for engagement. They want to, they really want it to be something special. So we see a lot of that. That's it.
Cool. What are institutions doing right now that you're seeing that is just wrong or like, not something that you would want them to do?
Yeah. I would say assuming that, and this is almost to a point of where, it's like they're assuming when they launch a new program that if you build it, they will come kind of mentality. So we see a lot of that. That's usually when we're brought in, when they realize a year later when they're in trouble. But a lot are, assume their brand will carry them. Even some top tier institutions are guilty of this. And we've seen it at some amazing institutions, specific when they launch an online program. We see this a lot. They fail to invest in the right marketing mix, if at all. So that's probably the biggest thing we've seen, just even failure to make it a priority. A lot are also, focusing on very generic stock imagery, kind of the sea of sameness in terms of how they're marketing the program, what the messaging is. It's the same as every other.
Super vanilla.
Yeah, very vanilla, very feature kind of focused, 2-year, 100% online, very flexible. That was great 10 years ago, but nowadays that's really not gonna do you much good. So, I think the focus of, we'll continue doing what we've always done, and kind of that complacency with that, we see quite often. And we also see, institutions really failing to connect marketing, enrollment, and retention. Some kind of silo those into their own separate departments. Where in reality, that story that you kind of craft on the marketing side, you get somebody super engaged and really bought into the mission and want to be a part of it. They come into the enrollment funnel, and the enrollment team's on a completely different trajectory than the marketing team. So that same story and message is not carried through, and it leaves the prospective student kind of wondering what they signed up for. So you're going to see a higher drop rate. You're going to see folks, even if they do go into the program, they don't see it even when they're in the program as well. It's not carrying through once they're actually in the classroom. You're going to run into issues there on the retention side as well. So I think failure to connect story and a consistent message across the enrollment funnel is definitely a major gap that we see, and something that we usually try to correct as quickly as we can. And that's a lot of times why when we do a lot of the discovery and story development, we create kind of a really compact guide that will help. We can distribute that to the whole team throughout the journey of a student, and make sure everybody's really clear on who we are, specific messaging, imagery, make sure in social media and emails from an enrollment advisor once they're in the program, that same kind of message and narrative is carried through.
Cool. How should institutions involve students in the branding, marketing, advertising side of things?
Yeah, that's a big one. Students want to hear from other students, and I think when you talk about, you can make a lot of assumptions, and I think we all do. We're all kind of guilty of that, especially in the administration level, where we're all kind of in our own little bubble. Working when we work with a lot of the folks kind of leading the marketing teams, we make a lot of assumptions, and I think that's kind of a failure on our part to not spend more time with students and understand how did they find you? What was it that drew them to your school? And it's kind of that scientific kind of research, thinking and kind of creating, something that you want to, go out and explore and find out, is this really the way we should be doing something? Are we putting our money in the right place? And students are going to be your best way to do that. So on the graduate level, we try to do that as often as we can and talk to alumni, talk to current students if we can, understand their experience in the program. Is there anything we can take away from that when we go and kind of reshape marketing messaging, which we try to do periodically to keep it fresh, again, going back to staying competitive. Talk to those folks as much as we can. And I also think it's just valuable from just understanding their experience. I think there's a lot of value not only in the marketing side, but changes we can make on the curriculum side of things, and there's a lot of value from that.
Cool. So why did you guys get into higher ed?
Yes, so we've always been intrigued by the industry. I started out in higher ed, as did our co-founder Robert Lee, and so when we started Circa, we recognized an opportunity to help a lot of institutions who may not have the resources or the knowledge to launch complex multidimensional strategies, and we really connected to the mission side of things. That schools are very mission driven, and our business as a whole, we're also very mission driven, and we connect with the missions of the institution, but we also have the mission of our organization as well.
So let's talk about the Higher Ed Marketing Journal. What is that?
Yeah, so about 6-7 years ago, being a marketer, I knew we needed to start producing content. So really my goal initially was just to start kind of publishing content, exploring some of the challenges, some of the things that are working for me personally. And that's kind of grown and expanded. We have some folks, leaders in the higher ed industry that'll write from time to time. But for the most part, it's content written from our team and different parts of our business, whether it's our digital PR team, our paid media team, our SEO team, who are kind of publishing best practices, things they're seeing. It gets very practitioner oriented. So our goal was really to make it very actionable, stuff that you can take and relate to and go back and apply it the next day. So it might be, Facebook targeting strategies, how to build out a creative guide that's going to help you define your brand, how to run a successful interview with a faculty member, that kind of content that's really actionable and designed to kind of help people in our industry.
Awesome. And how can people get in contact with you?
CircaEDU.com is our URL. Clayton at CircaEDU.com is my email. The Higher Ed Journal is CircaEDU.com/HEMJ. That's the best way to get a hold of us.
Cool. Thanks, Clayton.
Yeah, thanks for the time.
Appreciate it.
Appreciate you.
Shakas, and we're done. Yeah.